being 6:30, we're going to call to order this special meeting of the planning board.
There's nothing on here anyway, there is there?
Good. There's nothing on
There's
there?
there's no reason to look at that.
That's fine.
I don't know, it's just habit.
Yeah.
All right, so first up, we have reorganization to accomplish. So is there anyone who would like to make a nomination?
Madam Chair, I make a motion that we nominate Chris LaValle as chair.
Okay, you second?
I'll second it.
Okay, any other nominations?
I'd like to nominate Deirdre Connolly as chair.
I'll second.
Okay, so then we'll take a vote first on Chris.
Well,
All in favor?
Aye.
And all opposed?
Not necessarily.
And then we'll take a vote on myself. All in favor?
I
think it's obvious.
At this point.
Tons cheese.
Opposed?
He doesn't want to hurt anybody's feelings.
So Deirdre, you are the chair for another year.
Okay, and then what about vice chair?
I make a motion for Chris to be vice chair.
I'll second.
You willing to be vice chair?
Yes. Are you
All in
sure?
favor?
Aye.
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 Any opposed? Okay, and
You get the quirk.
clerk?
I make a motion that John be clerk.
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed? Okay,
Thank you.
Excellent.
great.
Switch seats?
Not tonight.
Not tonight? Okay.
We can.
Next seat.
Too
I'll go
much
over there.
work. It's too much plugged in.
It's all plugged.
Okay,
All right.
so we're gonna try and keep this quick. The idea is that we wanted to have a conversation about the MBTA zoning compliance. Prior to the last meeting, we had some new concerns raised in a letter to us from the EOHLC, Executive Office of Housing and Livable Communities. They had they had basically green-lighted our plan as previously presented to them, and then after the 90-day response period was over, they came back with an additional addendum of some concerns that they had become aware, I guess they somehow became aware of our development agreement, which they seem to have not been aware of previously, but it was my understanding they were. But in any case, they had some concerns about the development agreement that we had as part of our UMass Lowell development, which is part of one of our sub-districts. So they had concerns about the density in our development agreement was less than the density that is required by the MBTA zoning. So they felt that if we had a development agreement that specified a lower density, that would be in conflict with the MBTA zoning. So they asked for us to remove the lower density wording from the development agreement, which is, by the way, not our development agreement. It's a development agreement between the select board and the developer. So we don't have ownership of that, but since the MBTA zoning plan is our plan, in order to see it through, we're trying to gather the loose ends. So by way of background information, I guess. The other issue that the EOHLC had was they wanted to have us remove the verbiage from the development agreement as it pertained to the age restriction and the affordable units, because there is not supposed to be any requisite restriction for affordable or age restriction in the MBTA zone. So therefore, the development agreement, they didn't think should be referencing those aspects of the development. Not to say that a development in an MBTA zone couldn't have those aspects, but a development in an MBTA zone couldn't have those as part of its overlay structure. Does that?
Yeah, and basically, they're treating the development agreement as if it were effectively a piece of zoning.
Well, because it is sponsored by the town.
It is sponsored by the town. I think there are arguments that go both ways on this one, but it doesn't really matter because the changes they're asking for are so relatively minor relative to what else is going on, and isn't going to change one iota what gets built there.
And it's tied to the land.
Yeah,
So
and it's tied
like,
to the
unlike
land.
other parcels where it may not be as dense
Yeah.
currently, the zoning still allows for that density up to 15
Right.
units, right?
Right.
Whether or not it's financially
Feasible.
feasible is a
Yeah.
whole nother story.
Yeah.
This, because this development agreement is tied to the actual land itself, is the problem, and that's where the state's getting hung up, because they say, well, you did this overlay that allows for this density, but
Yeah.
the land itself could never be that dense, ever. So that's
Yeah,
where
which is
they're-
interesting because you can have private agreements that are essentially go with the land also.
Right,
Which
but-
would do exactly the same thing.
Those aren't
But they're
sponsored by the
differentiated,
town.
but they're not
That's-
sponsored by the town.
Right. I mean, I get
Yeah.
it, like, I think this is
I
kind
can
of,
see, I can see the nuance.
I mean, I do think the state is,
Yeah, it's a little off, but I don't think it hurts us one way or the other. I don't think we have a problem.
So,
Well, I think if it push came to shove, the optics of them kind of throwing a monkey wrench into the matter as it pertains to, affordable housing and senior housing, both of which we desperately need in the state, it's not very good optics. And I don't think, I don't really, at the end of the day, think that they expect this to not be built.
Yeah.
They're just asking us to
Okay.
cross some Ts and dot some Is. But anyway, I know there's some other viewpoints at the table.
before we do that, since the Finance Committee meeting, I worked with Evan to look at what the impacts are and the risk. And so I added those
Yeah,
to the
those were great
slide.
slide.
If you want, I can
I think that'd
talk
be
through those.
perfect.
Okay.
Thank you.
So on slide 20, I highlighted the three significant concerns that the state had with the developer agreement. As you mentioned, the capacity, 13 units per acre versus the 15, which brings us 77 units below compliance. The affordability, while we're still looking to have the 15% affordability, the current level is at 10, and the developer agreement brings that up to 15. And then the age restriction on the part of the development is also in noncompliance. So based on discussions with Evan and town council, the age restriction and the affordability are not as impactful, because if we remove those, there are state agreements that are in process, and those should be completed within 1 to 2 months. Once those are completed, it doesn't matter what's in the zoning overlay, that's what's going to be built
On the ground.
on the ground. The other area of concern was the 77 units. And so slide 21 starts to address why removing the capacity limit is, in our opinion, very low risk. The site as it's currently constructed or designed, there is no more space to build the 77 units and the required parking. They would need to completely redesign the property. If we were going through this when they were first designing it, that'd be a different story, because they could reconfigure it. But because they've already gone through the design process and started building, it's...
Permitted.
And so.
And, yeah, but I'll get to those in a minute. But the fact that it's already laid out and the building has started in that layout, it's very low risk. Slide 22 talks about the fact that the project is fully financed, fully permitted, actively under construction. So the fact that it's that far along, it's unlikely to change. Slide 23 talks about the If they were going to ignore all of those other things and actually go ahead with it,
I'm sorry, can I just interrupt for a sec?
Yep.
Your office slide, you're currently on 22 by the numbering online.
No, it says 23.
that's 23.
Oh, well, I just went on to the link, but it's fine.
Oh, it might be a.
Anyway,
So the next one outlines the modifications that any significant modifications to the plan would require these things. The first is that if the plans are modified after July 1st, that triggers the new special, the stretch energy code, the enhanced stretch energy code. Right now, the developer has pulled all of their permits based on the old code.
Yep.
So if we were to amend this developer agreement and have it effective after July 1st, they would have to re-pull all of the permits for any design changes, and that would require significant design changes for the energy code
And cost.
and cost.
Yeah.
They would also have to refile with the Mass Environmental Policy Act because the current wastewater treatment system is designed for the capacity that it currently has. There is no additional capacity beyond periodic spikes. So any new units would require a redesign to that and a refiling and re-review with MIPA.
Which takes time.
Time and
Significant time
significant
and-
cost.
Year and a
And a
half in the
significant cost.
Conservation Commission and our board would have to revisit, approve, and re-review all of the plans for the site. North Chelmsford Water would have to have another additional review for the additional capacity, 77 units. And that would potentially require increased fees and off-site capacity mitigation as well for the increase in units. So there are a lot of hurdles that would have to happen after that development agreement is changed for the developer to actually make significant changes. And so the proposed timeline, based on all of that, for adjusting the developer agreement would be after July 1st. Because then if any new permits were pulled based on that change, it would trigger the stretch energy code. And by then, it's likely that the regulatory agreements for the age restriction and the affordability would be approved as well. And those would be binding as well. So our timeline is assuming that all of that is in place, assuming we're able to pass the town meeting and then have the developer agreement changed after.
Yeah.
Yeah, and did not Paul at the FinCom also kind of say we did not have to, even though there's a 90-day requirement for us to file the zoning, the town meeting language with the state, that's one parallel path.
Yep.
But really, our timeline to change the development agreement is really
To fall.
12/31,
End of the year.
end of the year.
Yep.
So we can wait until the foundation's poured. I mean, like, again, there's a lot, may not seem like there's a lot there, but the whole septic is a significant
Yep.
amount of time and
Yeah.
cost for them. They're not
The
going.
stretch-
That may
Codes,
almost be
too.
the biggest.
Right, and the stretch.
They don't
like
want to
it-
waste any more time.
they
They've
don't
been
wanna-
sitting on this property a long
And,
time.
and again, they're not gonna wanna add
Yeah.
more cost to their project if they don't have to. and-
They don't have the space for it to begin with.
Yeah,
Yeah.
they can't go up
They can't go
any
up.
floors
Yeah, yeah.
because they're at the limit. And there's no more footprint to put the parking in the building.
and the other thing is that they have to date indicated, apparently, Evan had a conversation with Mark
Yeah.
yesterday or the day before, or maybe today even, where Mark indicated that he's spoken to all the stakeholders and he can't put anything, he's not unable to put something in writing at this time, but that they don't plan on making any changes, that they, like, this
Yeah.
is what they
Yeah.
were trying to build, and they have all the permitting and all the licensing and the approvals in place, and, like, for what?
And the rest of the developer agreement would still remain in place. It would
Yeah.
just be these three components that would be amended.
Yeah.
And they did come to town meeting and sell this as units that would count for our MBTA. So and that was the intent of this whole parcel to begin with.
Yeah.
That's what they sold
Can't
to us.
abandon it now.
Yeah.
Okay. So,
So I got a quick question.
Yeah.
For Chris. So we're 77 units below compliance, but if we change the developer deal, you're still in compliance?
Yep.
Yep.
Yep, because the developer agreement caps it at 12 or
13.
13 units per acre.
So what happens with the age restriction on the two other areas down the bottom of the hill?
Those,
that have anything to do with
those
this?
can stay in place, those have nothing to do with any agreement with the town.
it's not.
Yeah, that's
it's not
effectively a different
town-sponsored.
development.
Yeah. All right, I mean, I'll give you my opinion. I don't like the idea of changing the developer deal. I think you're opening Pandora's box. I don't think it's gonna, and when, you're saying very low risk, but there's a risk. I've seen developer deals change. These guys are out for their money, and I know Mark's a great guy, and he's a man of his word, but he's not the owner of the company.
And that developer agreement could change regardless of what we do with this overlay.
Yeah.
The developer deal could change, you'd have to go through the select board to get them to change it and go to town meeting.
Yes.
To change it.
But that's
Right
my
now,
point,
we've
is
You
got-
wouldn't
that,
have to go to town
Right
meeting.
now, we got to change the developer deal.
No.
No.
Just if the select board owns it.
I'm not recommending changing it.
Mike, that's my point, is that if we remove these things from the developer agreement, the rest of the developer agreement's in place, and there are other controls in place to keep these three aspects in check.
So I thought the town meeting voted on the developer deal after the select board
They voted on
recommended
the
it.
overlay.
No, we
They
voted,
voted the
we
overlay,
voted
but
the
not the
overlay.
development.
Did they not, they did not vote on the developer
No.
deal?
It's the select board.
So this can,
There's a risk.
But after July 1st, there's really not a risk.
There's a risk here.
Well, theoretically, I
So
mean,
just think about it. I mean, what could come back? And then David
I-
Henderson piece, they
I
should have been
think-
building by now.
I think there's more risk of picking another site because any other site is going to get built,
yep.
and that is going to have significant impacts to this town.
Mhm.
We also have a significant risk in waiting because the state could keep coming up with new things to change that we have to respond to within this year. If we're able to pass this at town meeting and it becomes
Get it
our
passed, yeah.
bylaw, then the state cannot change it on their whim. They have to go through the full process of changing our bylaws again. But without this protection in place, we would have to pivot very quickly, like we're having to do now, and get something amenable to the town in very short time.
I think, and the other issue is that, correct me if I'm wrong, was going back this afternoon at 5 o'clock trying to find the old districts that we looked at. So if we were to take the UMass West out of the district, then this district wouldn't be 25 acres. And we need a 25 acre
for the density.
district
UPS,
to
I
anchor
think,
the
was the
whole
only
thing.
other
And I think the
option.
only one
Was UPS.
might be UPS, and I think that's a very high-risk proposition.
That's a 50/50.
Yep.
And we lose commercial property if
Not,
that switches.
yeah,
If it gets
but we would think.
And this is gonna get built anyway.
Yeah.
And this is gonna get built,
And
is the
this
other thing.
This is already in our school, at the schools, like, we've already,
Gone through everything.
right, I mean, we have, they've figured out the capacity, estimated the capacity for schools, they've kind of already have that in the plan, right? Anything else that gets built, we don't have the capacity in our schools.
And Mike, I wrote low risk because I'm never going to say zero risk. But after July 1st, once those regulatory agreements are in place for affordability and age restriction, and the energy stretch code is in place, how likely do you think it is that the developer would come back and try and permit for 77 new
Change the plan.
units?
Change the plan.
Change-
Would it be a
That's such a
change, a
huge
complete change
cost.
of plan?
He's got 3 separate buildings here, he can change one building.
How?
He can, because he's only started on the big building.
Yeah, but there's no, you can't
That's what he
expand
said,
those
But
building
the
footprints.
permitting process
offer
on the,
77
You can
units.
make an amendment to building permits and drawings based on when you have a phased property.
To get
like that.
not the sewer
77
treatment
units?
plant,
Well,
that's
not
the
the
kicker.
sewer, not
The
That's
kicker.
fine, so I'm just saying, there's a
The kicker is the
risk
sewer
here.
treatment plant.
You're going back to
And from
open
what
up
I
something
understand,
that
it
we
took
had
them a
more.
year and a half to get that approval,
18 months to get approved.
just for what they have now. So they'd have to go back another year, probably another year, to get approval on a
I'm
a
sure
change.
but I don't know about the sewage treatment piece of it, but I'm sure they have additional capacity to support that.
No.
No, they don't.
They don't.
Only spikes, only
Only
temporary
spikes,
I don't know.
spikes.
not to add additional 77
Which,
units to
and
it.
you're gonna
You
have
know
spikes
that for
anyway.
fact?
We were told that at the FinCom.
By who? By
By Paul.
Trumbull Crow?
Paul McDougal?
Oh,
I mean,
Paul
no, sorry, not Paul McDougal, Paul Cohen,
I'll
so,
take it, yeah.
yeah.
Okay.
I just
He was at the
practically
meeting.
looking at it, I don't think
So
we're
the town manager
exposed.
said that the sewer capacity is exactly for the UMass exact amount right now
We
that's
got
being built
approved
for.
for what it was built for, no additional capacity.
Okay,
Which makes sense. Why would they make it bigger than what they need, you know?
because you always build for more capacity.
Well, there's a fudge
Especially when-
factor.
Spike,
Especially when
It's
you,
really a fudge factor.
no, but especially when you have a specialized unit like that, you always build in,
For spikes.
Yeah,
capacity.
yeah.
For
for additional.
spikes.
Oh, yeah.
Right, they built in for
But
spikes.
so if they went for the more, they'd have to build more capacity. You know what I'm saying?
No,
Yes.
there's
That would,
capacity- there's
that buffer would
capacity in
still
that-
be
there's
there. That
capacity in that
They're not
sewer
gonna
unit.
build, the buffer would still be there. It would be a much larger plant,
Yeah.
much larger.
But we can always pull that, can't, we can get that information.
Yeah, we can get that information.
We can get that
from DEP.
information, verify it.
I don't see a problem with changing the agreement.
Yeah, I don't either.
I wouldn't want to do it now,
No,
but
No,
I
if
think
we
with
wait-
this timeline.
When do you wanna do it?
Summertime.
In the fall.
So you're gonna get approval from town meeting for this based off of change in the developer agreement.
yep, and then
But select board has to be in favor of
Yes.
this.
they have to,
Yeah.
make- yeah.
We have to
We
get,
would,
They have to
we
do
go
it.
to them on Monday.
we're gonna ask them that, to agree with the process as it's laid out.
And then the policy that's going in place, it's gonna be signed with the age restriction on it, but the state doesn't like the age restriction.
The state
They
does,
don't
the
want it
M-
to
just
be
have to take it out of the
mandated as
agreement.
There are
part
two
of the
different
development agreement.
groups in the state. There's the MBTA restrictions,
Okay,
and then there are the regulatory agreements that are completely separate between the developer and the state. Has nothing to do with the town. And that's the key, is that this is a town-sponsored developer agreement. If this was only between the developer and the area residents or something like that, or the state, it wouldn't be an issue. But because this is a town-sponsored developer agreement, and it runs with the land, that's the issue.
Yeah, there was a hearing the other day that the state, you know, they were, one of the select board members spent 4 or 5 hours on it, and it's all about affordability, elderly housing, like, you know, there's a, you know, on top of the ADU, which is just a small little section of that law, right? I mean, they're not gonna come back and, they just don't want the age restriction in the zoning, but they're not gonna tell you you can't put age-restricted housing there. And we control that, that's
They
our
already told us
Chelmsford.
we could.
Right. Well, we
They
can't
told
do
us we
it
could have it in the project. Apparently, they didn't realize it was in the
zoning.
development agreement.
Development agreement, yes,
That's all.
yeah.
Till they were enlightened about it from somebody.
Anyone else want to chime in?
I think we're just working on Mike.
you don't need me.
I'm just kidding.
You got the majority, so.
No, but I
don't
think it's better if
I
we go-
understand that. I don't like the idea of opening up that developer deal.
I don't like it either, but I also think that the alternative to open up the whole thing again to districts that we've already discarded,
riskier.
that are going to
Yeah.
be much more risky and be built, whereas this is already going to be built in a format that's been agreed upon by everybody.
And they
It's just
sold,
not going to have in the development agreement these specific things that we've already been told we're allowed to have. We're just not going to have them in the verbiage.
Mike, what would you rather have for an alternative path?
For this one,
Instead of doing the amendments to the developer agreement, what would you rather see us do?
I think you can get the 77 units at the Radisson. It's a vacant building out
That's like
there.
a-
But
Yeah,
remember
it's a
what,
5-acre
remember what
spot.
NEMCOG said at the last meeting?
Only 5 acres.
Even if we pick another zone, we have to remove UMass from the MBTA zoning because of the developer agreement.
If we leave the development agreement as it
It's that
is.
You
500
still keep Windermere, you still keep the
No,
other areas.
it's not big enough.
Not big
Okay.
enough.
That whole
the
area
rest?
has to
Acre.
be gone. We have to
Gone.
completely pick
And
another
the
sub.
only other spot would be UPS, I think.
Yeah, that's, so if we could do it, what you're just saying, that way, and keep it as is, yeah, I would agree with you, I would go that way, but we can't. So now that whole area gets removed. We have just 110, now where do we add? That's where, like, again, no one, I don't think any of us are in favor of having to go back and open up
Okay.
the development agreement. I don't think any of us want to do that. I would prefer not to. I wish we had done the development, I wish we knew what our requirements
Yeah.
were, because if, in hindsight, we could have done that differently, or we could have.
Yeah.
And
not
Mike, we
have to do
brought
this.
that question up to them in the last meeting, and they did point out that if we did do that, the state would still see it as overcompensating for the developer agreement. And because the developer agreements attach that land, they wouldn't want to see that land as part of the as part of the
It wouldn't count.
MBTA's
Right,
overlay.
because the zoning, the law requires the density to be minimum 15, and that
Yeah.
land, right now, as it stands, the density is only 13, and that's the problem.
And if we remove that UMass property,
FinCon was on board with doing it this way too, right?
Well,
Pretty
we have to be presented to FinCom, and they have to vote, but
Pretty much from the,
Yeah.
you saw it, yeah.
if we remove that
Conversation.
overlay, or if we remove that UMass property, the rest of the properties are not big enough to be considered a sub-area for the MBTA zoning.
Okay.
that's why we had to add Windermere and,
And if Select Board doesn't agree to open up the developer agreement, we're back to ground zero?
Yep.
I think we have to go back to look at our previous
go through
districts.
public
And
engagement
then do
again.
the public intake, and then do the 90-day submission, and then still try and get it past
For the fall?
town meeting, which I think will be a harder sell, because it will be
It'd be a special town meeting.
invariably something else that people want less, I would think.
Okay. You guys feel that strongly? I'll go with you.
I don't want to drag you kicking and screaming.
I just don't like.
Making the
I really
best of
don't
a
like
bad
the idea,
lot
but,
is what we're doing.
We've been in this together, so.
Trying to make some lemonade.
Yeah, I agree. I still wish we could have added a second floor to the, or third floor to the.
So I
Chelmsford
wrote,
Mall.
I kind of wrote up, and it may have too much background information. I kind of started writing from the end, and then I was like, well, this is just kind of out in left field, like it needs some.
Gotta be tightened up.
All
a
right,
little
so I wanted us to have something to start with, but I'm totally open to,
bit. Revisions.
yeah, wordsmithing it, cutting out whole paragraphs or sections, but, I mean, I think we have to start with that we feel like we have to comply with the law, and that we see this as the best way
Yeah.
to comply with the law, and do districts that are not gonna have an adverse impact. And the reason why we think it's not as risky to reopen and revisit remove this language from the development agreement is because of the mitigating factors that you just expounded upon, that I use your expounding to write up out.
Do we need a letter? If we take a vote tonight and we have the slides with all of that information in it, and we're presenting to the select board on Monday,
Yeah, we don't necessarily need a letter. I actually came up with the idea to write it when I thought we weren't gonna have an opportunity to really meet with them. So I had wanted to have us have a collaborative conversation, but it seemed like that was not gonna happen. So I thought it made sense for us to at least arrive at our conclusion and our request to them, So, I mean, we can make it verbally, or in the,
Yeah.
in the form of a motion, I guess.
Yeah, I think we're all, I think most people will be in agreement.
And if you wanted me to add more detail into the slides, I can do that as part of the presentation on Monday.
I think the slides were excellent and very, and highlighted what needs to be highlighted.
I would, you know, it would be helpful maybe if we just put in, if we can get estimates of how much it would cost.
Could you talk into your microphone?
Sorry, no, it would be if we could add in, or at least know the amount it would cost to, you know, like, how much does it really cost to go and redo a whole septic?
The
Plan.
energy code, the energy stretch code would be a huge cost to them, I believe.
Because I think when people see, like, the numbers, then, like, that kind of, then you kind of go, oh, yeah, like, no one's going to lose $10 million for 77 units, or 20 million, or 30 million, right? Like, those
Yeah.
numbers start to, you begin to realize the magnitude, and I think that might help.
We can probably, well, I don't want to say probably. I'll talk to Evan to see if we can work with folks to get that. I don't think we'd be able to get it for Monday.
No, but maybe good for town
But
meeting.
at least town meeting, we'll see what we can do.
Yeah.
Okay. So then, should we do our request in the form of a motion, or should we just leave it as you will be making that request in the form of the presentation?
I think we should do a motion, and I would move that we recommend to the select board on Monday the recommendation of modifying the developer agreement to remove those three conditions: the affordability, the age restriction, and the capacity limit, based on the proposed timeline that we have in the slides.
For clarity, after July 1st.
After,
After
after, at some
approved by
point
town
after
meeting
July 1st
And approved
in,
by the town, in town.
yeah,
meeting.
in the fall.
Yep.
And that we work with the select board and the developer to have some type of verbal commitment to that fact
If
before
not
town
written.
meeting.
Yep, I'll second that.
All in favor?
Aye.
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 Right?
Okay. So I also started writing up a letter kind of on the heels of the select board. I don't know that you guys saw or had a chance to read their letter that they sent out to everyone under the sun, which was an excellent letter and built on some of our discussion from last meeting. But when I started to write a letter, I was like, this is kind of ridiculous. Like, they already said it really well. So I thought I might put it out there to our board to see if we think that that letter would carry more weight if it came from the two boards, and if so, we could perhaps, if we agreed with their letter, we could perhaps ask if we could be signatories on their letter, and then I personally would like to have, if we are signatories on theirs or not, even though the public input session that was held on Tuesday is closed, if we talk to our representatives and/or promulgate a letter to maybe the Little Sun, or maybe the Boston Globe, or maybe WBUR, and try and get some more traction from other stakeholders, I think that would be a benefit. And I think certainly any of us speaking individually carry less weight than us speaking as a board, and it's possible that even both boards speaking together carries more weight. So I would like to say, I would like to support the select board's letter, and then see what others think about asking if we could become co-signatories, and then we can ask the select board at their next meeting if that's something they would be interested or willing to do. Anyone have thoughts on that?
I agree, I think.
I
agree.
She nailed it.
I didn't
She
see the
nailed it.
letter.
They nailed it.
I didn't get a chance to read it.
That's fine.
You can abstain.
It's kind of a lot of what we talked about last time, so you can read it between now and then.
Yeah, that's fine.
Or you want to read it right now?
No, it's fine.
Okay.
Yeah, I totally agree, 100%. My only other recommendations is I'd like us to reach out to other planning boards and make sure that they're aware. We do our own, outreach.
We can do that. And also, one other thing I would add, if we were going to add anything, would be a bit more emphasis on the fact that it's just so the timeline is so constricted. It seems to be rushed and almost in the interest of not getting feedback, which is really annoying to me. And that, I don't think was emphasized as much in their letter as I would have personally have emphasized it. Like, I feel like it's being poured down my throat a bit.
Yeah, oh yeah, no, I definitely feel that they're trying to get this passed quickly, and it's hidden under the, we've got a crisis with housing, and we've got to make it affordable. I mean, I'm sorry, but after 4 hours of listening to them on Tuesday, I'm like, okay, no one's reading between the lines. This is just be shoved down our throats. And it's a shame, because I think it's going to impact the cities and towns like Chelmsford probably the most than, say, the more wealthier towns, like
They have a lot of big lots.
that have large lots. Even Westford, right? Our state rep is from Westford, who's sponsoring this agreement. Well, they have their town has a lot of space, and their lots are bigger. They're not smaller like Chelmsford, and there are other communities like Chelmsford that will probably be impacted the most, and will be more. We're going to be more like a city.
And even the cities like Lowell are against this too.
Right.
Oh,
They
yeah.
testified against
That's what's
it.
the most distressing to me. They debated this last summer, and they're one of the largest cities in the Commonwealth. So if it's not right for them, how can it be right for Chelmsford?
Yep.
No, I'd support if the select board would entertain having the planning board sign. I would support that rather than us trying to redraft another letter. I also went back, and I think it needs, all of the points were emphasized. I went back and looked at the public hearing and the input session that we had last fall when the school superintendent and a school committee member testified and raised their concerns and brought up the fact that we currently have 36 modular classrooms at the schools right now. 22 at the elementary, I believe the number they gave, and 14 at the middle schools. So realistically, if our population goes up, how many more, I'd like to ask our state reps, how many more modular classrooms can we physically add to the Chelmsford Public Schools before we have a crisis?
Or how many school buildings are they willing to fund
Right, and
for
that's,
us?
right, because we're just, due to the efforts of the school committee, our superintendent, we're just beginning the Parker Middle School process, and as everybody knows, that was a heavy lift to get to that point, and it's going to be years before that comes to fruition.
If
So
it gets
realistic,
approved.
if it gets approved, right, voters have to approve it in the state, and realistically, that's going to be years to bring that about. And then what do we then do for an encore after the Parker Middle School?
And the other thing is that the numbers that they are throwing around are, I don't know the basis of them, but they didn't seem to give any basis, but they said that this might generate 10,000
Like 9,000,
units.
yeah. Statewide.
And we think
statewide.
we're going to generate over 4,000 in Chelmsford. Like, it doesn't make any sense.
No,
Yeah,
it's 4,000
available.
Eligible
lots
lots.
here.
Not
4,500.
everybody's
But,
going
I
to do
mean-
it.
They're not everybody's
But
gonna
how
do
do
it.
they come up with 10,000 in the whole state, or 9,000 in the whole state?
Yeah, yeah.
If,
Should be more than that.
yeah. They're
Within the next
Undercutting
4
the-
years,
They're
they said.
definitely,
They
they're
said within the next
definitely
4 years.
undercutting, because let me tell you, and they kept, I think one of the things I heard during that was, they wanted more owner or occupied, you wanted, the younger generation being able to have their dream house, buy their houses. Well, all this is doing is incentivizing developers to come in and buy it and make this investment property.
Investors.
Well,
yeah.
they took the owner occupancy out.
Yeah, I guess, but like,
That's
you're.
the biggest thing to me. They got to get that back in.
Yeah, no, I mean, like, you hear them say, oh, there's a crisis here, people, are not being able to afford houses, to buy houses. Well, great, but, hello, what you're gonna pass is incentivizing the exact opposite behavior you just got up
It's going to
in
make it
front
worse.
and spoke to what you wanted out of this, and that was probably the most frustrating thing.
Yeah.
All right, so I'll take a motion.
Make a motion to ask first one, to ask the select board to add our
Co-sign.
names and our signatures and co-sign their letter.
Yep, I'd second that.
And also for permission to further promulgate it, in addition to the extensive list to whom they've already sent it.
He second, and
Yeah, I'd second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Okay, any opposed? And then I'll take a motion.
Motion to adjourn?
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
All right.